Come gather around, everybody. We're going to do another session of the DC Art Academy where you're going to see another professional artist actually create some work here. And it's one of my favorite artists of ours, Chad Hardin. You might know him. Come on, give him a big round of applause. You might know his work from Harley Quinn, or if you're now reading the new, it is Wonder Woman, is it Come Back to Me?
Come Back to Me,
yeah. Which, if you haven't been buying the Walmart Giants, these are now being put into periodicals that'll be at your regular comic book stores. So if you saw earlier, there was some art of Chad's where, again, he's drawn another great iconic female character of DC's and Wonder Woman. Looks fantastic. And Chad's going to be doing some art with this. I'm going to ask some questions. So come on, gather around and see how comic books are really made. And we're going to use some old school equipment, which is good as well. See? Don't you like the whole... Yeah, right. See? It's the whole new wave art color palette, right?
Yeah.
It looks good. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you knew it was going to match the whole background and everything else. So, yeah. Okay, so we're going to, I'll ask you all kinds of other questions, but we'll get into how art is made and how it's all constructed.
All right.
What are you going to draw first today?
Well, what do you guys want to draw? Do you want to draw Harley? You want to draw Wonder Woman? Let's hear by applause. Who wants Harley?
Who wants a Harley? Okay.
Okay. One clap.
Wonder Woman.
Wonder Woman? Oh.
All right.
All right.
Okay. It is Diana Themyscira going here. So you're starting with pencils. You're doing a lot of work these days, I believe, digitally. Is that right?
I am. I do a lot of stuff on a iPad Pro, and then I bring it into Photoshop right there at the end.
But you started with traditional tools.
Yes, I did. And if I could choose and deadlines weren't a matter, I would just stick 100% traditional. But deadlines are like really, really important for comics. You got to make sure that you're hitting your print dates and all that. So I switched to digital because it's just so much faster.
Well, and you get a lot more control and power over that as well.
Right. There's lots of undos. But I've also found now that I started teaching is that working traditionally actually builds a lot of confidence. So if you're a young artist, I really recommend that you keep a sketchbook, that you learn to draw things the old-fashioned way, because lots of times if you can undo, and sort of like taking the training wheels off a bike if you work traditionally. So it really helps to build that confidence, and confidence leads to speed and decision-making abilities. So
because I mean, so much of this is second-guessing moves or gestures and things you put in there. Now, on the construction, what do you start with when you build an image? Do you start with, I mean, you're going to do a headshot of her. Is there a particular place in a drawing that you start with from experience? Yeah,
I usually will start with just what I call the head sphere, and then I know the anatomy well enough that when I first started, I'd slice off the side of that head, and then I'd pull a line down the center, and then add like a little tiny ear here, and that's the ear. If you know the anatomy, then this comes across. This is the brow line.
Right.
This is the nose line, and then underneath is the chin line. And once you memorize those things, you commit those to memory.
Right.
You don't necessarily have to draw them every time. You just sort of know where they go.
You instinctively feel the proportions.
Right, exactly.
But it takes that kind of physical, constantly trying and putting out there before it becomes rote.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And I have to think it's absolutely true. It's the difference between using pencils or other physical mediums and digitals. It's not an either or. In fact, one informs the other and one enhances the other.
Yeah.
So when you get someone like Wonder Woman, obviously when you go a long run out of another character, you've got it down. You know the character's tweaks the same way you know the proportion, just by memory. When you knew you were going to work on Wonder Woman, did you go back and look at other styles, or when you first do a character, what is it? How do you approach it?
I think I went back and looked at some of the Adam Hughes covers. He did such an excellent job doing the covers. When I was, before I was in comics and whatnot. So I looked at a lot of his illustrations, and he really captured that Amazon, that, strong, tall, tough female, warrior, but still at the same time, incredibly beautiful. And so I looked at a lot of his stuff. I looked at a lot of Brian Bolland.
Right. I mean, these are the two great Wonder Woman cover artists of the era, right?
So, just try to really look at what they were doing and see if I could pull that off in the interiors. It's a whole different game with the interiors,
Right.
because you don't really get to decide, make all those decisions. You don't really have the freedom. You got to make sure you're following a script.
Right,
so
and
it's a little harder.
you're telling a story. Now, I think that's one of the major breakthroughs when you go from just learning art to learning sequential art. How do you pace and tell a story? Now, where do you think you picked up those techniques?
Welcome everybody
By reading
to the
comics.
DC
Yeah.
and
by
Warner Brothers
just,
booth.
I-
We're honored to have
I
the
get that from my
Superman
students
Year
a lot too.
One
They're
All-Star
like, I
team,
want to draw
writer
comics too. I'm
Frank
like, oh,
Miller,
really? What comics do you
penciler
read? And they're like,
John
well, I don't
Romita
read comics. I'm
Jr.,
like, well, why do you want to draw
Danny
comics?
Mickey,
You don't read comics.
colorist Alex Sinclair.
And they're like, well,
front
I
and
just
center,
I get to
right here
I get to draw all
at
the time. And I said, well, that's
DC and
true, but
Warner
you
Brothers
really
booth.
need to learn
Right.
the storytelling. You need to learn the pacing and things like that from reading it and knowing what to do. So it's one of those things that if you read comics, you sort of instinctively pick up.
Right.
It's like a language that you're
Yeah.
studying subconsciously.
And occasionally a very grumpy editor, right?
Yeah. Try not to make the editor mad. That's a pretty big rule.
Well, as a freelancer, it's just not a good way to go, and
Yeah.
everything else. But it's not an easy skill. There are lots of people who are incredible figure drawers and can do all kinds of things. But the ability to do interiors and play stories. Now, you're reacting to scripts. Now, I was going through your body of work, and I was shocked to realize that it's Countdown to Mystery is your first DC credit.
Yes.
So you've been drawing for us for well over 10, 11, 12 years now.
Yeah.
But the second series you were on was you did some spirits.
Yes.
Right. So
Yes.
you're getting
Yeah.
scripts from Mark Evanier and Sergio Aragones. I mean, you as a little fanboy, you must have kind of thought that was pretty cool. Right?
It was
Yeah.
very cool
Yeah.
because, and here's the thing that freaked me out the most. Sergio
Yeah.
sent a drawn script.
Oh
It
no.
was drawn.
Oh no. Okay.
So I'm like, Joey, what am I supposed to do with this?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
drawn already,
That'd be editor Joey Cavalieri.
Yeah. And so
yeah.
Joey's just like, no. He goes, that's just how the script's coming in.
Yeah.
You put your interpretation on it now.
Well, see, that's good because
Yeah.
in the old Mad tradition, back in the pre-Mad days, Harvey Kurtzman would do not just the scripts, but full thumbnail layouts, and I think he fired Severin or got into a fight with him because he didn't do it exactly like the thumbnails. So there was no deviating from that. But
Yeah.
he respected their mechanical ability here. Now, when you get different scripts, is there one writer in particular that has been the easiest for you just to kind of read what their message is and put into practice?
Mark Waid was a lot of fun to work with.
Yeah.
I've never had a bad experience with my writers. There was a few times, and this wasn't for DC. I worked with a novelist writer who it was for a comic book called Warhammer, and he was like, panel 1, 10,000 orcs storm the ridge, and I was like, no.
Right.
And then sometimes you work with people who have written for television and whatnot, and they don't quite understand that you can't show two actions in one panel.
Right.
Right. But you just turn it into two panels.
Right. You have to interpret it at that
Right.
point and give them what they meant to do as
Right.
opposed to what lack of training did.
So yeah, just sometimes you just keep that in mind and you'll be okay. But the people who feel like you need to draw like every piece of chainmail on every orc, that can get a little tedious.
Well,
So
you have to
makes for
find.
some late nights.
It is an economy thing. We do have deadlines, so you have
Right.
to find ways to condense these things. Now, you're focusing on the hair right now. Is the hair a really vital part? I mean, I know in Harley, the hair was almost like its own personality.
Yes.
Right? Is the hair like a key part for the characters for you and the other ones? Or?
I just like spot. This is called spotting your blacks, where you're filling in large areas of black first. And normally, if you're handing this off to an inker, you just make a little X like this. You just do something like this, and then the inker would fill it in for you. But when it's you, you got to fill it in for yourself. So I'm just going and.
But you wouldn't, the first part is you really seem to focus in on the eyes and the facial expression. You got her fierceness and then her gentleness, and now we're going to flare this out with the hair.
Yeah.
Was it a treat for you to draw Wonder Woman?
It was an absolute treat. One of my first memories was watching the Wonder Woman television show with Linda Carter when I
Right.
was very young.
I mean, for a long time, it's all we had was we had repeats of Adam West. We had
Right.
Linda Carter. I mean, we didn't do too bad for ourselves. They worked. Now, you were growing up, let's see, you're in Las Vegas, right?
Las
and then
Vegas,
you moved
Nevada.
to Utah.
Yep. Yeah.
And how old were you when you moved over to Utah?
I was fully grown.
Okay.
That was an adult decision.
Okay, it was an adult decision. Okay.
Yeah. So
'cause
my entire childhood was Las Vegas.
And then you got into comic books in Vegas. Is that what were you reading when you were growing up?
Well, I always Batman was always on my pull list.
Okay.
And it was a great time to be a Batman fan. That was Frank Miller's
Oh,
up
yeah.
here. Batman: The Dark Knight Returns was like just insane. It
We
was
got
Batman
that in The Killing Joke all
Batman
within
the
a year,
Killing
right?
Joke, right.
Yeah, and
Yes,
then year one and year two.
Yeah,
and
then Jim Starlin's The Cult. I mean, it was just a great time to be a Batman fan. And Robin: Death in the Family.
Right.
All those were going on when I was a kid. I read a lot of competitor books. We
Yeah,
won't
sure.
talk about those, but
Yeah. We all did, and many of those great artists migrated over here to DC,
exactly
so
right. They're here now, right?
yeah.
So
We all have to work. But
yeah,
no, it's
I
really
read a lot
true.
of Jim Lee books.
Yeah. Well, he's not ashamed of them. So
Yeah.
No, it's really true. There was you never know sometimes that what you're in is a golden moment, and the particular period he's talking about in the late '80s was just a rush of incredible Batman, both before and after the Michael Keaton movie. And then when we got that, we'd had both flavors of Batman. We had Adam West, and now we had a darker Batman, so it all fit together. I am going to pitch this, by the way. If you have free time, you should go over to the AT&T Batman Experience over in Balboa Park. We've got Batmobiles, Batman costumes there. We had to bring Michelle Pfeiffer's whip from the museum, from the DC Library, to fill that out as well. So we're going to just a few minutes here, and I had all these questions I wanted to ask you. You're a teacher now as well, is that right?
I am. I teach at Utah Valley University in Orem, Utah. I'm a professor of illustration.
Well, this is, kind of like a bit of coursework here. Has teaching informed you as an artist?
You know what? You really have to. The biggest problem I run into is this something they call professional blindside, where you have to sort of rewind your brain back to the point where you didn't know these things.
Yeah.
I mean, lots of times I tell my students, I'm like, okay, do this job, and they'll even come back to me like, well, you didn't pay me. I'm like, well, did you write an invoice?
Yeah.
And they're like, what's an invoice?
Right.
So you really have to sort of rewind your mind back to that point where you didn't know how to do some of these things that are just sort of second nature now.
Well, and it's always the tough in any medium where if you're really good at something that comes to you intuitively, how do you put that into words?
Right.
When the attitude was, well, you just do it. I
Yeah.
mean, there is something about you can't fake how many hours you have to put in.
Right.
I mean, if you did an invoice for the number of hours it took you to be an artist, it might scare people, I'm
Right.
sure. But it was a passion, it's what drove you, and you don't do this if you don't love it.
Right.
Because the hands hurt, the back hurts, everything else with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Sitting. Before Harley, I weighed 200 pounds and ran 5 miles a day. And sitting for 16 to 20 hours does not do a body good. So.
Now, for Harley, you got to be in there on Bernie the Beaver, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Was he a lot of fun to be able to drive? I mean, that's really one of the most twisted characters we've had in years.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
But I understand. I've seen pictures of a beaver.
Yeah.
In the Bird of Prey movie.
I've heard rumors of such as well. That made me very happy as well. I was just happy there was a toy set recently that came with a Bernie the Beaver with it. And I was like, well, that's fantastic. So
Yeah.
He's a taxidermied one. Okay, so we're going to wrap this up, and we're going to give this piece of art out.
Okay.
So it is a Wonder Woman question. Let's see here. What can we do? Who can give me the Amazon fight call first? It's a one-word answer. Anyone? What do the Amazons say when they go into battle? Oh, you're killing me here. Okay. Second question would be, there's a game that Wonder Woman plays where they shoot a gun at her and she bounces it off. What is that called? It's called something in bracelets. What do you shoot out of? Yes. bullets and bracelets. That is it.
Hey.
You know, you are the winner.
All
You get a
right.
Chad Hardin original Wonder Woman. Chad, that's okay, right? I can,
Yeah,
I got it.
absolutely.
Okay, good,
Absolutely.
good,
That's
good.
why I did it. Yeah.
Sorry, I might have spoke out of turn. Yeah, yeah.
I had. There's a funny story about that. I did a panel like this in Denver, and one of the DC artists had spent this time. She was trying to finish a commission.
Yeah.
You know, had spent hours
Oh,
on the
God.
commission,
Yeah.
and then they gave it away. She was like, "What?" Anyway.
Well, you saw this right
I've
here.
learned.
So you've actually seen everything about this creation process. So you're going to be doing some signings here very shortly, is
Yes.
that right?
Yeah, Jimmy, Amanda, and I somewhere on the Metropolis.
Yeah, so
side.
Metropolis signing stage, which is at the opposite end here. And I love Chad. I also love Jimmy and Amanda. They're three of the most fun people and nicest people in comics. And they make some great comics as well. So let's give everybody, Chad Hardin, a great hand for showing us his process, producing art for all of us. All of you just keep reading. And Chad, thank you so much for coming out
thank
and
you.
doing this for us today. Really
Appreciate
it. All right, so
Oh, who won? Oh, okay. All right, come get it.
who would have thought bullets
You're welcome.
saved you today, right? Yeah, yeah. Okay.
You're welcome.